If you were stranded on the Event Horizon version of a sailboat, one which was hell-bent on locking you in the toilet room while dragging you out to sea and tormenting you the entire way, what would you do? Joe's a simple fisherman, just looking for his daily catch. Ironically, he was the one caught. The sea god may hate this man, but his fate isn't sealed, and Joe's not going down without a fight. I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the ghost ship in the boat. We start out following Joe, a lone fisherman boating off the coast of Malta by the Duedra Inland Sea. Once he gets a good distance from the mainland, a thick fog rolls in over him, kinda like the mist. That's never good. It seemingly comes out of nowhere, which is odd, given it's the wide open sea and you would think that Joe would have seen it forming or drifting in from a distance. It's also odd because the Maltese climate isn't capable of producing fog like this. The warm Mediterranean waters, strong sea breezes, and dry air only allow for a light mist at most. Joe, witnessing this near impossible phenomenon that is drastically reducing his visibility, probably should have immediately turned around and headed back for shore, or at least clearer water that he could actually navigate. Instead, he thinks nothing of it, drifting deeper and deeper into the dense fog until he can't see more than 10 feet in front of his face, at which point he clicks on his super helpful boat light. Thank God! I was afraid other large boats might not be able to see us. Luckily, he didn't get knocked overboard, and his boat didn't get too badly damaged. Gee, I think we'd better 180 this thing and get back to land. Nope. Okay. Kinda weird that Joe didn't see that boat on the horizon before the fog rolled in. He'd been heading straight out, and the fog came from his left, yet somehow the sailboat that hit him did so head on. He's only been drifting for a minute, which means that he should have seen it long before impact. Not only that, but where the hell did it go? 1 second, it slammed into him. The next, it was gone. That shouldn't be possible. Then, just as he's catching his breath, the same boat emerges out of the fog and sails right past him. Again, it's not possible that an unmanned sailboat with folded up sails is playing bumper cars with him. This whole situation is already strange and unsettling. As he drifts past the ghost ship towards its stern, he sees the name of the boat, Aeolus. If Joe knows his Greek mythology, he should find the name of this ghost ship eerie and disturbing. Listen closely, nerds. Do you hear that? Well, probably not, because there was nothing there. But if there had been someone screaming for help in my basement, you can bet that it would have sounded crystal clear through a pair of Raycon's everyday earbuds. Raycon is the only brand of earbud I trust to deliver a top-tier listening experience right out of the box. And the best part is, they do it at half the cost of other premium brands. Of course, gearing up for your next adventure is about so much more than high-dollar audio at low-dollar prices. You also need to make sure your equipment stays cocked, locked, and ready to rock whenever and wherever you're gonna need it. And that's where Raycon really comes in clutch. I love mine and use them all the time for when I work out, go on walks, and listen to music when I'm writing scripts. With a battery life of 32 hours, Raycon's latest model has you covered all day long, and then some. And even if you somehow manage to drain them dry completely, all it takes is 10 minutes on a charger, and they'll be back in action for at least another 90 thanks to their quick charge functionality. And with multi-point connectivity, letting you pair with 2 devices at once, you can seamlessly jump from phone to laptop and back again without anyone hearing a peep of your catgirl ASMR. In the business, we call that OPSEC. Anyway, I'm sure you already know that I'm a big fan of Raycon's awareness mode and ergonomic gel tips. But now they even come with an IP66 rating, which means there's no amount of waterboarding that'll stop me from enjoying the latest episode of True Crime Loser. So if all that sounds good to you, click the link in the description or head on over over to buyraycon.com/nerd to get 20% off Raycon's best-selling everyday earbuds. Thanks again to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Aeolus was the keeper of the winds, depicted in Homer's Odyssey as the one who controls the air current and determines the fates of sailors. Granted power by his daddy Zeus and his uncle Poseidon, he ruled from the mythical floating island of Aeolia, where he kept the four cardinal winds Boreas, Notus, Eurus, and Zephyrus locked in a bag. Aeolus wasn't good nor evil. He simply chose whether to help or hinder sailors, releasing either favorable breezes or destructive storms. His winds could carry a sailor safely home or condemn them to a watery grave. That said, Greek mythology never mentioned Aeolus operating a sailboat, so there's probably a more rational explanation. It's also not an unlikely name for a sailboat, and maybe the crew's just snoozing below deck. Given the thick fog and eerie silence, that would be the most logical assumption. Still, considering the hazardous conditions, boarding makes sense to call for help, get his bearings, or at the very least, avoid getting rammed again. Drifting aimlessly into the mist isn't much of an option, which is exactly what Joe does. He then searches every single room on the boat, including the bathroom. Despite it clearly being lived in, there's not a soul aboard. It's possible they fell overboard and are in need of rescue services, which is why Joe quickly turns on the radio and attempts to call Valletta Port Control for help and to report an abandoned vessel, but he gets no response. When he goes topside, his boat is gone. Impossible. Unless someone deliberately untied both cleat hitch knots that he had secured to link the boats together. Except Joe already searched this entire boat top to bottom. In a panic to find his boat, he rushes to get the binoculars, because that will help when the fog is so thick that you can't even see 20 yards. Face it, man. Either the Commando Subacquea Incursorio Tessio Tessai, aka Italian Navy SEALs, is pranking you, or you just boarded a certified ghost ship.
Yes, I can definitely smell shit.
Joe tries to fire up the engine to see if he could drive the Aeolus back to shore. No dice. The battery's dead. At this point, the fog is completely lifted. With no landmarks in sight using his binoculars, no electronics, and no radar, Josh relies on dead reckoning to estimate his possible distance from shore, then celestial navigation to determine the correct heading back to Malta. The problem with dead reckoning is that it's notoriously unreliable, especially after drifting in the fog, contending with unknown currents, and switching between two different boats. The best he can do is map out the maximum possible distance that he could have traveled, assuming the worst case scenario, that he drifted straight out to sea at his boat's maximum speed. One thing is for certain, he left in the morning with the sun directly at his back. Since only a few minutes have passed in real time, the sun is still in roughly the same position. That means the way back to Malta is due east, straight towards the sun. No need for the suspiciously broken compass on the boat or the engine. Just some friendly west to east winds with the sails deployed. Even if the wind is coming from the north or south, he can still sail at an angle, using a zigzagging tacking pattern to slowly make progress eastward, back to Malta. It won't be fast, but it's his only shot at navigating without an engine. The big problem here is that if there's no wind, if the wind is blowing east to west, pushing him further out to sea, or if the current is dragging him away from shore, then he's screwed. His only hope would be for a passing vessel to spot him before he perishes, or the Maltese Ashton Kutcher coming out to tell Joe he got punked. Moments later, he hears a large thud sound below deck. Then the bathroom door randomly slams shut. Must have been the wind. Joe returns topside to deploy the sails so he can start heading east. Good thing he's got some sailing experience, because otherwise, I don't think you're pulling this off. When the wind dies down, he investigates the engine to see if he can get it running somehow. I'm guessing he suspected the starter motor or solenoid was stuck due to the carbon buildup, corrosion, or something else. which would also be why the battery light came on when he initially turned the key. This would be why a couple taps from his hammer suddenly jolted it free enough to engage and crank the engine. Now, with engine power, he continues heading east. Yet, there's still no sign of land through the binoculars. When he goes to take a leak off the side, scumbag Aeolus wallops him good. Luckily, he manages to hold on and climb back up. Understandably, he's freaked out, because if he had gone overboard, drowning would have been a certainty. Joe decides to finish taking his leak downstairs in the safety of the bathroom. Midway through, the door slams shut behind him again. He thinks nothing of it. You know, wind, until he tries to get out. The door won't open no matter how unlocked it is. Thinking it's jammed, he yanks on the handle, tries to pry it open, tries to unscrew the lock with a coin and scissors. Nothing works. When he opens the cabinets looking for anything that can aid him, he finds a bloody hand mark on the shelf. To make matters more urgent, he hears a radio response trying to hail his boat. It's from the large cargo ship he spots out the tiny window. Knowing that this might be his only chance, he does everything that he possibly can to physically bash his way out of the door, but it doesn't even budge. So he removes his shirt, sticks it out the window and waves, hoping somebody will spot him and realize that he needs rescue. In a Hail Mary move, he grabs a rope through the window and hurls it over the side, aiming for the motor. If it catches, it'll jam the propeller and bring the boat to a stop, which is his only chance to keep from drifting past the cargo ship if they actually attempt a rescue. Problem is, the sails are still deployed, and if the sailboat's catching wind, it's gonna keep on sailing right past the cargo ship. Unfortunately, he accidentally looped the rope in front of his neck right before it caught. Yeah, that one was on you, dog. Joe manages to pry the rope off of his neck moments before getting choked out, only to watch the other ship disappear off into the distance. Honestly, he should have kept trying to signal them with his shirt. Given that they were already on a collision trajectory, the cargo ship's captain, likely scanning ahead with binoculars, would have had an increased chance of spotting his SOS signal the closer they got. Sure, he could have broken off a piece of the mirror and stuck it outside to flash the boat, but they obviously already saw him with their horn blasting. And there's not really a better way to signal that you're trapped inside your bathroom. The good news is Mediterranean shipping lanes typically run 10 to 12 nautical miles offshore, but depending on its route, the ship could be closer, within 3 to 5 nautical miles, if it was heading toward Malta Freeport or Grand Harbor. This could provide an idea of his distance from shore and how long it might take him to reach shore, provided he can escape his bathroom and get the engine untangled. Expertly using the boat hook, Joe successfully furls the head sail, presumably to keep the boat from drifting further off course, except that doesn't quite solve his problem. The head sail's primarily responsible for control, helping to steer and balance the boat, while the mainsail, the one still fully deployed, is responsible for propulsion, meaning Joe just sacrificed control while leaving the boat powered. If anything, he might have made things worse. While stuck in the bathroom, Joe hears all sorts of strange noises on the boat, almost like someone's running around doing something. Whatever that was, it cut the rope that was stalling the propeller, enabling the boat's engine to crank back on, sailing him to God knows where. Even worse, water's pooling on the floor. It's possible that the collision with the cargo ship damaged the hull, leaving a leak that's slowly but steadily letting the sea in. Now it's not just a matter of where the boat's heading, but how long it'll stay afloat. I'm not sure why Joe's just sitting around all mopey and defeated. It's a boat bathroom door, not Fort Knox's vault. The interior doors for bathrooms on a sailboat are generally lightweight and not very sturdy. They're designed to be space efficient and water resistant, not heavily reinforced. I guarantee you that with a sufficient amount of kicks, it'll eventually break. That or keep trying to unscrew the knob. Anything. Time is not on your side. And every minute you waste is another minute potentially getting sailed further out to sea. Instead, he prioritizes cupping out water through the window, which neither solves the leak or gets him out so he can correct the heading, both of which are about to become very important, as the boat is sailing straight into a particularly violent-looking storm. Joe is getting rocked. The boat's filling with water through the open hatches, and now his plan is to use a razor to cut the ropes holding up the sail in order to prevent the boat from rocking and rolling mercilessly, which could have resulted in the entire boat capsizing, which would be bad. The storm eventually passes, but Joe is still locked in the bathroom. At this point, it's honestly getting hilarious. All of this just because he tried to take a leak. Unfortunately, kicking his way out isn't going to be nearly as effective now that the bathroom's 3/4 filled with water. In one last effort, he goes underwater, turns the knob, and shoves his way through the door. Finally free, he gathers the bathroom door, sailboat fenders, snacks, water, and a paddle, ties himself off to the sailboat, and waits to see if it sinks, or if anything unusual happens. When nothing does, he paddles back, boards the sailboat, and leaves his makeshift life raft unattended while he goes below deck to drain the water with a pump that he found. Given that something previously untied both his cleat hitch knots, leaving him stranded, he should have secured the raft properly, or at the very least, pulled it aboard. If he's wrong about the damage to the sailboat, his life depends on that raft. His next order of business, pull the sails down, then dangle himself off the side of the boat to seal up the crack in the hull using some kind of marine epoxy, fiberglass resin, or waterproof sealant over a patch of fabric. At least he tied himself off with 2 separate ropes. Although, I'd also have pulled the life raft around to the right side as well, so I could keep an eye on it to make sure it doesn't mysteriously float away like his previous boat. Once the hull is sufficiently patched, Joe hooks the battery back up and tries to crank the engine. Nothing. Dead. As for the sail, well, he did cut the rope, so that's not exactly an option either. Just as he scrambles to fix it and get the sail deployed, he spots another ship cruising close by. In sheer desperation, Joe jumps onto his makeshift door raft and furiously paddles towards it. Problem is, the ghost ship isn't done with him. Okay, that's impossible. The sails were completely down, the engine was off, and yet the boat still managed to fully rotate and accurately ram his. At this point, either Joe's being seriously pranked, or Aeolus is not a myth. Now it's nighttime, the ship is long gone, and Joe is completely alone. Well, not exactly. A pack of dolphins has encircled him, which, all things considered, isn't the worst thing that could happen. Malta's coast isn't really known for sharks, but that doesn't mean a hungry one couldn't find him. The good news, dolphins tend to stay within 10 to 20 miles of land, so there's a chance that he's still not too far from shore. They also follow ships, which means a vessel may have passed nearby, or will soon. More importantly, they're unlikely to be near large predatory sharks, which means he should be safe for now. Of course, none of this changes the fact that he's still alone, still stranded, and still completely at the mercy of the open sea. Now, if all the dolphins scattered suddenly, that would be a bad sign that larger predators are coming. Oh, look, they're all scattering suddenly. The good news, it's not sharks. The bad news, the Aeolus is back to torment him some more.
Oh man! Oh God! Oh man!
There's simply no way this thing isn't a ghost ship. No sails, nobody up top piloting it, and somehow it finds him in the Black Ocean at night. I think Joe best start believing in ghost ships because he's on one. Without any options, Joe hops back aboard, grabs a jacket, and passes out on the bed. When he wakes up the next morning, the bedroom door is locked, just like the bathroom door in the beginning. Before he begins his day-long struggle to break through, he hears a thud from the other bathroom. Look, before we get baited into another trap by this evil jelly bean trail of weird sounds, let's pause for a second. So much of this is inexplicable, and if Joe's even remotely spiritual, which at this point he'd better be, then we have to at least entertain the idea that this is Aeolus' doing. Clearly, we've angered him in some way, and that has been demonstrably bad for our health. So, how do we earn his favor and finally get the figurative and literal sails at our back so we can go home? First, we need to acknowledge his power. In Greek mythology, gods and divine forces demand respect. That means prayer, offerings, and tributes. Give something to the boat, pour out some wine, cook him up a nice filleted fish, something. Secondly, we don't want to waste his gifts, nor take credit for them. In mythology, Aeolus gave Odysseus a bag of winds to sail home, but when one of his crew opened it too soon, they got blasted off course and doomed to wander for years, which must have sucked. So if Joe gets a break, a gust of wind, the engine miraculously starts working, he'd better use it wisely and show some thanks instead of assuming he's amazing and lucky. Third, sail with respect, not arrogance. Hubris is punished with divine punishment in Greek myths. If Joe disrespects the sea, assumes control over forces bigger than himself, or fails to be thankful for any small mercy, things will get worse. At the end of the day, Aeolus isn't purely good or evil. He simply rewards those who respects the winds and punishes those who don't. If Joe wants out of this, he needs to stop fighting against Aeolus and worship his holiness. Come to think of it, this whole thing started to badly spiral after he got urine all over the side of Aeolus's boat and threw a rope into the propeller. A little please, thank you, and sorry for on the side of your boat would have gone a long way, man. There's no guarantee that any of this would work, but kindness costs nothing. Joe, still thinking this can't possibly be a ghost ship, that there just has to be some kind of explanation, goes to investigate, which is when he finds the secret door hidden beneath the toilet lid. When he opens it, he hears what sounds like someone scurrying above deck. Crawling inside, he finds a bloody knife tucked among canned food. Of course, the way up is jammed, and the door he came through, it suddenly shuts and locks too. Bro, at this point, with how many times you've been trapped on this ship, you would think you would have learned to block doors with whatever debris that you can shove inside. No, it's not a guarantee that whoever or whatever is toying with you won't just remove the obstruction, just like the boat hitch knots that were mysteriously untied back the first time you encountered the Aeolus. But it'd be better than nothing. Now the scumbag sailboat has Joe right where it wants him, trapped inside with a view of the sea town it's sailing by to add insult to injury. Out of nowhere, the door just pops open. The bedroom door becomes unlocked, and for the first time in probably a week, Joe sets foot on solid land. Thinking whoever was messing with him is in one of the nearby buildings, he grabs a pipe and goes hunting. After wandering through a few buildings, Joe turns back, only to see the sailboat inexplicably cruising away on its own. He takes off after it, chasing it around the bend, only for it to vanish into thin air. When he finally returns to the dock where he first set sail, he finds his own boat just sitting there, as if nothing had happened. As if it had never been missing. The movie ends with Aeolus lying in wait, just beyond the cove, ready for its next victim. Joe's left with the worst week of his life, one he could never explain, a literal ghost ship. One that couldn't be tracked, couldn't be destroyed, and left no evidence of its existence. Was it a lesson? A punishment? Maybe it just wanted to mess with him. We'll never know. What we do know is that the sea god hates this man. The worst part, just like with Day in the Pool movie, this is honestly too embarrassing for Joe to hit the podcast circuit with. So I boarded this boat and then got trapped in the bathroom for 3 days. And then I almost strangled myself with a rope when I tried to stop the boat. And then I booped my head on the doorknob when I slipped. And then I cut my finger when I tried to sail the boat from said bathroom. And then the boat somehow landed me safely ashore. Bro, just tell your work that you got the flu really bad. Ultimately, the ruler of the winds didn't take everything from Joe, but it could have if it wanted to. And for that reason, the movie remains unbeaten. Moral of the story, Aeolus is kind of a